You've probably heard the saying, never date somebody in your own studio unless you're 100% sure they're going to marry you next week. Well, let's just say we've personally tried this up before and it didn't go too well. We'll just say there was a lot of therapy needed for the rest of that semester.
However, we do know someone who did do it the right way and is now getting married.
So, if you couldn't tell already, this isn't going to be your typical Crit Room podcast episode. In the spirit of Valentine's Day, we got a special theme for you today. It's all about relationships in studio.
So, if you got a baddie in your studio that you're interested in, maybe wait till the end of this episode before you pull that trigger of asking them out, because we might just save you from a semester's worth of cringe and thousands of dollars worth of therapy.
So grab some chocolates, write down a couple cringy architecture pickup lines, and let's get started. In 5, 4, 3, 2, 1. Welcome back to the Crit Room Podcast. I'm your host, Ryan, with my co-host.
Albert, just Albert.
And joining us today is our very first Crit Room appearance, Tom.
How's it going, Tom?
It's pretty good. Things are good.
So, Tom, I think you're in Chicago, right?
Yes. Yeah. I've been living in Chicago for a couple months now, working at an architecture firm here and studying for my AREs.
Dude, you sound so busy.
I was going to say, I'm about to start mine very soon, too. So I'll be hitting you up for some tips.
Yeah, I'm procrastinating on that. So, see you guys later. But yeah, a quick backstory of how I know Tom. I've known Tom since my first year in architecture school. We were actually in the same studio with Professor That's Interesting, and he was basically for me was my architecture school rival. He was my goal to strive for every single studio time. He always stood out because he was so dedicated to his work and how efficient he was always with everything. And so you probably wouldn't see him in studio past like 10 p.m. or anything like that because he was just that good. But yeah, that's my first time meeting Tom.
That's interesting to hear you say that, Albert, because I always thought we were good friends and not rivals in first year.
We are good
And in
friends,
my
but
head,
also
you were the gold standard of what drawing should look like. So
no. I remember Tom specifically in studio. He would always get a check plus from Professor That's Interesting. And I was like,
check plus?
How do I get that check plus? And Tom was just, he was, like I said, he was the goal for me.
Yeah, and then I think, correct me if I'm wrong, Tom, it's been a while. A lot of these years are starting to blend together. But the first time we were really in a studio together was with Professor Meets 2.0, second year.
Yes.
Working on the farm incubator project. Yeah.
Yeah.
No, and I remember always being like, man, this guy, he knows a lot of things. I need to keep some tabs on him and what he's up to, because you think about architecture in such a unique way compared to a lot of, like, looking through portfolios and seeing the projects that you've come up with. You have a very interesting like form factor that I don't think a lot of people do. So it's cool to see what is he going to think of this time, especially when it comes to like our last semester studio, where you see him creating models out of pencils, like a billion number 2 pencils, and it turned out like one of the coolest projects in the entire
so
class.
Cool to look at.
That was a cool one. So someone just asked me about that the other day. It's like, yeah, but that model did not survive the move to Chicago.
Oh no!
Did it get crushed, or did you just throw it away?
That's why documentation is important. I have plenty of pictures.
Yeah.
That's what. See, this is why he was my school rival back in our first year, because Tom was he was up there. I was just like, how do I get up there?
Always one step ahead.
Yeah, for sure.
Really good at faking it.
Yeah, all jokes aside, though, we're actually really happy to have Tom with us today and super excited to get his perspectives on this topic because, this episode is all about our own experiences with dating within architecture and, what we took out of it and maybe things that you should avoid so you don't embarrass yourself and have a whole bunch of cringy semester stories to look back on. So I guess to start this out, Albert and I did a little bit of research, just curious to see what was out there on the internet about dating and architecture and stuff. And we found that one of the more interesting like statistics, and you guys listening can play this game too. But we were curious about what's the percentage that you think of other designers marrying other designers. So there's two numbers. There's like the general. What do you think the general public marries within their own industry? And then there's the specifically architecture one. So Albert knows this answer, so he can't really play along.
Yeah,
But
I can't. I
I
my
don't know
hands are
this
tied.
answer.
What would your guess be if you just
I
I'll give
think.
described
you a
them?
hint. It would be under 20%. That
Oh,
would be my
okay.
one hint.
Oh, what
All
did
right.
you think beforehand?
I do think that the architecture and design pairing is probably a higher percentage than like the
Mm,
national average.
mm.
I think under 20. I'm gonna go 15% architecture, and then
Okay.
like 8% national average.
Mm.
Okay. I was gonna say for everyone at home, here's the answer. But it's kind of funny because you're basically spot on, but backwards.
Yeah.
Oh no!
It's actually 12% of the general public marries within their own industry, from what we found. I'll link the either throw up a screenshot or I'll put a link in our description for the episode. But and then it went to specify that only 7% of architects marry within their own industry.
Yeah, I thought.
So
Okay,
I
Tom.
I
I
thought that
thought
was
the
kind of
same thing
interesting.
as you. I thought the same thing as you. Was like big number architect because that's all we do. We are in studio all the freaking time,
Yeah,
and then small number for the.
yeah, yeah. I mean, I might be biased from my own experience and where I work. It's a husband and wife owned firm.
Mm.
Oh.
Okay, see that makes so much sense. Along that same note, I don't know if you know this, but I just found this out today actually. But there's a list out there with equations that actually tell you what happens when architects and engineers and other professions date other professions. So here's a link. Give me a second. But here's a link. But I'll also share my screen real quick and see see if you can see this. Can you see this?
I was gonna say for those listening to the episode right now, not on YouTube, not to overly shout it out, but you should definitely check out the YouTube version of this episode.
Yeah, dude, there's a whole equation of like what type of baby you get when, um, like what architect plus architect, what does that equal? Apparently, an architect. I,
Yeah,
I,
yeah. Walk us through like six of them
yeah, the
and
ones
see
that
if what people think at home.
yeah, the ones that I saw are like architect plus interior designer equals graphic designer. That's interesting. Um, another one is architect plus doctor equals plastic surgeon. And here's another one. Here's another one. An architect plus a model equals a statistical improbability. There's
Oh,
another
the
one.
shade.
There's
Wow.
another one. Architect plus engineer equals IT specialist. An engineer plus an engineer equals a German engineer. So you're just basically doubling down on your engineering stuff. And then an engineer plus interior designer, statistical improbability as well. And then an interior designer plus an interior designer equals a statistical improbability. That one's interesting because I don't know. I thought they would have liked each other, but apparently it's not meant to be.
I think this one is interesting because, if you think about the interior designer plus interior designer, imagining them being married, having the same house, who actually gets to design the inside of the house? Is it rock, paper, scissors? Is it
That's
like
probably why they have
let's look at the portfolio and see who has the better projects?
I think we should go room by room.
Oh,
Mm,
yeah.
So it's a
You
hot
get the kitchen,
together.
we'll
It's a
get the
hot
living
mess.
room.
Each room is great.
mm. But like, how do you decide who gets to design what?
Oh
Rock paper scissors?
yeah.
Well, going back to your firm, again, not to like out them or whatever, but I was just curious. You said that they were both married architects, or is one an interior designer, one's an architect, or
No, they're both architects who also graduated from K State a couple
Whoa.
oh,
years
hey.
ago, well before our time. But yeah, they're both architects. and they don't have a
Wow.
kid, so I don't know if your equation would work.
They probably
That's
don't
funny.
want another architect in the future.
Yeah.
Too much of a good thing can be a bad thing, you know?
Can you just imagine like a doubling down of architecture? That's crazy. That means they don't ever sleep ever.
I'm not sure if they currently do.
Well, I guess while we're on that note too, just to kind of get to know your situation a little bit better, and we'll start to insert some more questions and stuff after this too. But we were curious. So, obviously, you're an architecture grad now, and you have a spouse who is also
Not yet.
from our. Oh, not yet.
Fiance. Sorry, we're getting there.
Fiance. Okay.
They're getting there.
We
I
clickbaited.
know.
We're
Depends when
yeah.
you listen to the podcast.
Oh,
Right.
true.
Okay. But what like discipline is she in?
She's in landscape architecture. So, as I'm not sure if you are your listeners are familiar with the K State program, but she was also in Albert and I's first year studio with That's Interesting,
Hmm.
and so that's how we met. And but she is um, finishing up her last semester in landscape architecture right now.
Woo, she's doing her thesis
Ooh.
now,
Yeah.
dude.
I was gonna say I heard the landscape architecture class. Like they definitely work for that thesis. I think
Yeah,
the architecture side of things got off at a little got off a little nice.
I don't know if you guys did. You guys end up making books for you guys or for your thesis,
Nah,
No.
at least not for us.
dude?
I know
I
you
remember.
guys did.
Yeah, we made ours, but ours is like I think max 120 pages. But I went over to the landscape. Oh my god, guess how many pages they have?
Yeah.
50 plus. That's my
Oh,
guess.
No, they're like 500 plus.
300.
What?
Yeah.
Yeah.
It's insane the difference in our different disciplines.
Man. Well, yeah, okay. So I guess that now that we've gone through our introductions, we kind of got a little bit of an understanding of our situations. We can start with one of our more first rounds of questions, which is just you kind of hinted at it a little bit earlier. But if you can remember back then in your first ever studio where you met Millie, do you think you were looking for in your relationship at the time? Or was it just, out of nowhere kind of thing?
Yeah, you stumble upon it.
Mm. We did kind of stumble upon it. I was not going in to the semester. It's like, all right, number one priority is to find a girlfriend.
Yeah.
And so I'm obviously very glad it worked out. And yeah, it was. I mean, like we've even talked about that before. She was also in a similar situation at the beginning of the semester, and just both wanted to kind of make sure we had our own things figured out before bringing someone else into it.
Mm.
Yeah. Well, so when do you think it started to happen then? Like
Mm.
through the semester or whatever?
Oh, it wasn't until late in the semester.
Mm.
It's kind of, well, we have different interpretations of when we started dating. But
Oh, what do you? Okay,
uh,
what one is yours and what was
according to
hers?
me,
Like,
um, she asked me out on the day of my final presentation in the very first semester,
oh,
Whoa.
which was December 5th. So a very important and very stressful day for me. Uh,
So what did she
but
do? Did she like right before you're about to present, she's like, Tom, wait, wait.
no, it was earlier. It was in the morning. She like texted me or messaged me and asked if I wanted to go to a coffee shop together like that
Mm.
weekend or something.
She knew the way to an architect's heart.
Yeah.
Coffee. Lots of coffee. Yeah.
Yes, but even before that, we'd been spending a lot more time together. Um, she had agreed to. I didn't have a car. She agreed me to drive me back to Kansas City so I could get home for Christmas,
mm.
and quickly volunteered to play Mario Kart with me when I finished my project early. And I
Mm.
only had one other controller. So
That's an important. That's an
yeah.
important part of the story. So, studio had a big impact on how you met with each other?
Oh, definitely at first. Yeah, and just kind of that first year college experience, right? Like living in dorms, going to
Mm,
the dining hall, and it's you're you're I feel like always on campus or in a school
mhm,
setting in a way
mhm,
that as you get older and move into an apartment or something, it kind of changes.
mm.
Um, but yeah, definitely at first. I mean, a good way to meet people is spending 8+ hours a day every day
Right.
with them. So
Yeah.
I was gonna ask about that. If you can remember back and if you're comfortable with sharing, do you know how did it come about? Like when you first walked into studio, were you immediately like, she's the one,
Awestruck?
or
Yeah, or like there
yes. Yeah. And then like how did that develop from there? Was it just like you started out as friends at the beginning of the semester and then gradually just like like you were saying, 8+ hours in studio every single day, you tend to get to know people pretty well. And then that's just how the spark came about, or what?
well, it was not love at first sight, and she will tell you that right off the bat. This weird kid who is playing with his new pencil clicker thing. Yeah, no, she was not about that. But definitely, as the semester went on, we became closer and closer friends, beginning to spend more time out of studio, whether that's eating lunch together or studying for other classes that we were both in, or other uh, activities. Like she went out with us a few nights
Mhm,
um, in Aggieville, as is
mhm.
tradition. But um,
Tom, I have a video. I have a video of Aggieville night. It was kind of fun.
there are a few, not many, but yeah, it is
Yeah.
fun. It was definitely kind of I don't know, it feels weird to say a slow burn because it was like
Yeah.
4 months, but
Yeah.
it was not an immediate situation.
Right. I think
Huh,
with
yeah, interesting.
because I think I went through something similar with you, but not with you, but
Don't tell
but
Mali
like
that, yeah.
News
but
heard.
in my second year, I went through something similar. It kind of was like it within studio because we just spent so much time in studio, and then it just developed into spending time out of studio. We watched like a bunch of videos and movies, and then we just kind of connected that way, and then eventually got together. But yeah, I think it's very similar to how you described it, Tom, where you first met in studio, and then second, you kind of like started moving it gradually up by spending outside of studio, and then eventually just it just happened. But what made you interested in her?
Um, wow, that's a very good and loaded question. Um,
Yeah.
well, there's so many things. She's obviously beautiful and smart and amazing. I feel like uh, I was really impressed um, with like her level of dedication and kindness and how she interacted with other people too. Right,
Mm,
like
mm-hmm,
obviously an incredibly skilled designer and very passionate about that, but also
mm-hmm,
like um, making sure that that wasn't the only thing that was important to her, right? How
mm-hmm,
she treated other people with kindness and respect, and how she interacted with friends and just strangers. I think that's a very, very important and a very good indicator of someone's personal
mm.
character.
Yeah, dude, that's a good answer.
Yeah.
She probably just was like, "I'm ready to marry you right now."
Yeah. Well, I guess you've already answered this a little bit. You said Mali was the one that asked at the final crit, but I guess if you could think back on that and imagine it more in like a broader sense, did you ever think that possibly asking somebody out like in studio would be bad for like studio or like focus or just whatever? Like,
Well,
did you ever make like a pro versus con analysis or anything, or like, yeah,
yeah, I mean, I definitely thought about it. I think honestly, something that helped our relationship was that we only had one studio together, and it was that very first one.
Mm,
Because splitting off into landscape architecture and architecture, um,
mhm,
our academic paths crossed less and less.
mm,
So we were still able to like having that foundation, right? That first
mhm,
year is, applies to everyone. And so kind of having those principles, if we're asking each other for a review, is definitely helpful. But she knows. I mean, yeah, we joke about like she knows everything about plants, and then she's like, "What do you know about?" And I'm like, "Bricks." So
Yeah.
What does a brick want to be?
Brick wants to be a
Yeah. Professor Meese 2.0 just smiled right there.
That's so good.
But yeah, definitely. I think, yeah. So we didn't have a whole lot of. I mean, people knew we were dating, and I think some professors eventually did, but it was never a situation where it's a partner project. All right, who are they gonna pick? Because we were never really in a studio after that first one again.
Hmm. When you're moving the relationship forward, right, within the whole studio, something that's always bothered me in studio or in most studios with a lot of like relationships within the studio was the dynamics changing or something like that. Because I would not want the dynamics to change within the whole studio because certain people were dating or something like that from my perspective. But I guess, did you notice any dynamics changing with our studio when you and Molly started to hang out a lot more with each other? Or
Um, I'm not really sure. To be fair, I might be completely oblivious to this. As the person in question, but I feel like um, I did not notice a huge change
Mhm,
in our
yeah.
studio dynamic, and especially because it was towards the end of the semester, there was already a pretty set kind of rhythm or dynamic within the studio, um, and probably because it was gradual and towards the end, there wasn't a huge I don't know, mix up or change of
Mhm.
the studio dynamic. But I can definitely understand how um, that could happen in other situations.
Because I remember with mine, I was in 2 semesters worth of like studio of being with her, and it definitely like changed some dynamics with other people for me. Because at some point, I was maybe kind of like you
Oh,
was
being
like,
with your partner, you're saying,
yeah,
Albert.
yeah, with my but with my partner. But the I remembered it just felt like people were noticing that you guys were together a lot, and so they didn't want to like poke and prod you or something, or like be more
Interject or get in the way of things.
yeah, get in the way with like with you guys because you guys were kind of the duo or something. Like that's how I felt.
I was gonna say, I think I can, from more of a third party perspective, we were during that time Albert's talking about, we were in this giant, we call it the Fishbowl Studio over at K State. It's just a
Yeah.
giant glass room basically with whoever knows, like 3 studios worth of desk in it. So it happened to be where my desk was basically across from where Albert's was. But everyone that was in that room all came in at the same time and all left at the same time, pretty much.
Hmm.
So then when we would look over, especially when those earlier parts were starting to kindle between Albert and his partner at the time, we were like, they're walking in and out of studio together a lot more often. Wonder what could be going on over there. Oh, this is the 3rd week in a row. I wonder what could be going on over
We
there.
were just playing badminton, Ryan. We are just playing badminton.
It is definitely
Yeah,
hard to keep secrets in studio.
Mhm.
yeah, definitely. So yeah, I don't know if, I guess more on that question. I don't know if it really changed anything. I think it's just, snickering underneath the table at lunch or whatever. It's like, ooh, I think something's happening over there. And
I mean,
that
yeah,
was kind
it's
of
like
just it.
it's high school gossip. It's the same.
On the cheese myth. Yeah, I don't, yeah, I guess I can't really think of any instance where we recognized that people who weren't dating then started dating in a studio. It was just clearly 9-day differences. I think most people, once you get to college, are pretty mature and just stay in their lane, like, oh, that's happening now. Anyways, I got a floor plan to make.
Yeah, people tend to just like mind their own business, it sounds like.
I was going to ask another question. So obviously, studio takes up a lot of time, and you're there till ungodly hours that I think most people outside of architecture or just design in general wouldn't really understand. So I guess you have a little bit of a benefit with Mali being in the same program and understanding those time conditions and time restraints and all that. But for your specific scenario, or even just more broader general advice, how do you think you guys balanced your, academics with studio and actual like personal relationships? Like, did
Mhm.
you have a schedule that you lined up to make sure every Friday we would have date nights, or like, what happens during production weeks and all these other things? And how did you communicate that? Because even between programs, there's different timelines. Like IA or LA would have different production weeks than we would. So,
Yeah, definitely. That's a very good question. And I think there's definitely a benefit to like understanding, oh, we're both in this very rigorous and academically intense program. Um, and I think like that having that knowledge allows both of us to help support each other, and
Mhm.
having not quite the exact same overlap, right? Like her production week might be a week or before or after mine, and just taking a little extra time out of your schedule to like be like, hey, are you okay? I know it's gonna be a rough week, or dropping off some snacks, or any, just taking a little extra time out of your schedule, which I know sounds hard, but it's important,
Mhm.
to to make those uh, um, commitments, like as part of your relationship. But
Mhm.
and then yeah, I mean, we definitely made a point, like every day to have lunch or dinner or both together, because everyone has to take a break to eat. So I'd rather spend it with her
right.
than alone. So um,
Makes too much sense.
yeah, and then and yeah, we never, I feel like, had a super regimented schedule of like, all right, every second Tuesday is date night, but we did like manage to make a
Mhm.
good effort about taking time away from studio to go, just either if it's going out to dinner at a nice place, or watch movies at home, much more chill. But yeah, being conscious of the time we're spending outside of studio and making plans for it. So yeah, and that can be part of your time management. Like if oh hey, this week we agreed we're gonna do something on Thursday night or Friday night,
Mhm.
maybe spending a little extra time earlier in the week, to get ahead so you don't lose any progress.
Mm.
That's a good perspective on it. Yeah. I was gonna say, from my personal experiences, I never dated anybody within the college. There was an instance in my fifth year where I was dating someone who was actually in a whole different state. So that also came about its own challenges, especially, well, again, I had the benefit of her also being in the architecture and design realm. So she also had a underlying understanding of how things worked in the studio environment. It didn't make it any easier knowing that, oh, we're too busy to talk at 8 p.m. on a studio night or something because everyone's
Yeah.
busy. But I do remember us communicating a lot just to make sure that we were taking at least a few moments before each of us would either go to sleep or whatever, because it was also across different time zones. So that even made it more difficult. But just trying to make sure that, even if it's just like a 50-minute call or something, or FaceTime for 10 minutes before going to bed, my time and whatever else, I think those really helped keep things from becoming too overwhelming or like too taxing without, seeing each other, communicating it properly enough. And then there'd be other moments where I knew if there was like a gap in studio, it'd be easier to take a bit of a break to like fly out to meet them or whatever else for some type of trip over breaks or whatever it was, or extended weekends. So
Yeah, I remember Ryan just he would be stressed out right before like going to fly somewhere because he knew he had a lot of work and he'd spend so much like time to just be with the other person. But dude, I remember that time like you were very committed to like getting your work done early so that you can go fly
it was a
someplace
whole
like
different focus. It's like now there's some stakes on the table. We I can't pretend to look back and forth between these two floor plans. We just gotta choose one and go. We got a flight to catch in 4 hours.
but it definitely impacted your focus, you say, your focus and productivity.
For me, I think a little bit, just because again, there's always that constant, oh, let me check my phone real quick to make sure I didn't miss a text from an hour ago, or
Mm.
other simple things like that for me. But
I'm notoriously bad about texting back. Um, I've gotten better at it, but yeah, I don't know. I think part of what Albert alluded to at the beginning is like when I'm in studio, I hyper focus in on studio, and once the headphones go on, no one can take me out until I choose to. So
Albert with his "Do Not Disturb" sign on the back of his chair
I
that
do.
never worked.
I talk way too much, and that the do not disturb sign does not help at all. Oh my god, dear
because
lord. There
everyone
was a
wants
time.
your opinions. They're too good.
No, it's not even about that. It's like I found this really cool video. We just talked about it forever, and then I'm like, I gotta get back. Like 2 hours later, I gotta get back to work. There was actually a time in my fifth year thesis because that was so bad for me that I had to switch up my like schedule from working early in the morning to working really late at night and then sleeping for 4 hours, go back to studio, sleep for another 4 hours, and then going late at night because it was just so I could not focus. I had to switch my schedule because of it.
Maybe pivoting a little bit more. So, especially since you two are in different years from each other, also different disciplines, did you guys ever sit down to talk about like supporting each other's personal growth and development for careers and everything? Especially, with the pressure of you already graduated, her on her last year. I'm curious about how those conversations went about and everything.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah, definitely. And I mean, those are definitely important conversations, but they can also be kind of tough, right? I mean, I feel like a big one for us was deciding on where we would both be interested in living, right after
Mm-hmm.
graduation, right? Are we gonna stay closer, or because our families are also in different cities? Are we gonna try and go back to one of those, or are we gonna go somewhere else?
Mm-hmm.
Are we going to go to Kansas City with everyone else? We both kind of made a list of places we were interested in. And then because I had my internship and graduation first, I applied to those places on the list, and Chicago was the one that I heard back from. So, yeah, we definitely, prepared and talked about it. She's started the job search here too. And there are landscape architecture jobs in Chicago, but they are definitely competitive. And so
Mm-hmm.
yeah, we're entering a new phase where it's I'm trying to help her, support her with that
Mm-hmm.
job search and that process, and making connections when she's in Kansas and I'm here, right? If
Mm-hmm.
there's collecting business
Hmm.
cards or doing some networking or meetings and stuff, if there's anything I can do to help with that, I definitely try and make a point to do that, because yeah, I feel like I do think about sometimes that I've pigeonholed her into now just having to apply to Chicago. But we definitely, we knew this was going to happen, and we talked about it. And
Mm-hmm.
now I feel like even I guess we haven't talked about this, but even now jobs more and more can be done remotely,
Mm-hmm.
especially um, with architecture.
Right.
I think
Yeah.
Mm-hmm.
there are definitely benefits to being in the office, but if it came to it, I feel like I hear about a lot of people who are still able to work from home a majority of the time.
Dude, I have full faith in Mali though, because Mali, we were in the same studio, right? But you know this, Tom. You've seen this. She's an amazing designer, and she was always one of the best ones in the studio. So I'm not even, dude. I'm not worried for her because, dude, her designing skills are amazing. So,
Yeah.
but if worst comes to worst, though, you could start your own firm,
Oh my gosh.
being a landscape architect.
If I had a nickel for every time someone asked me that, we are not doing it. No. Yeah, we talked about that too. Because everyone's like, "Oh, it'd be so great because you can do the house and she can do your yard," and then we're like, "No, absolutely not. We love each other. We get along great. We cannot work together. We're too like. I feel like I think both of us, thinking about group projects, would try and take control or take the lead, and then
Mhm.
nothing would happen, or we'd be fighting the entire time. So we're currently not planning on making our own studio.
That's probably smart.
We just know that about ourselves, that
Mhm.
I don't think anyone would have a good
So to play devil's advocate a little bit, or maybe just to speculate or do a thought exercise, if you will, do you think it was actually pretty beneficial that you didn't date somebody that was also in architecture with you? Like in a parallel universe, let's say Mali was in architecture in same year. Do you think that would have significantly changed how either the relationship went or just the dynamics of it and all? Or
I mean, I think certain aspects would have definitely changed, like obvious aspects about where we would go, what we were looking for in terms of like jobs and moving and that kind of thing. I feel like it would change a lot, but I don't think it's hard. That's a hard question for me to think about.
mm,
But I think that yeah, because we'd also probably wanted to preference the same good professors, so we might have
Hmm.
ended up in similar studios. But I think it would have changed like kind of the professional or academic side of our relationship greatly. But I think our like the personal side like of our relationship, I think would have been pretty much the same, right? We try and maintain a good balance of separating out like how we would interact in school and professionally versus at when we're together like at someone's house or
mm.
Hmm.
whatever, right? Everyone has different sides and how you act when you're around different people and in different
Hmm.
settings.
Maybe Hour has something to add to this thing too, because you guys were actually in the same studio, right?
Yeah. Well, dude, I was such a that was part of my like immature part of my life where like I I'm a person that likes to help a lot. Like I like to help people because that's just who I am. And so what would end up happening with me when we're in the same studio or when even not in the same studio, I would tend to try to help her project to achieve to greater like lengths that I don't know, I just like to help people. And so at some point it became a detriment to my own learning and focus and productivity where
Because you're putting so much time and all this other resources outside
yeah.
of your project.
Yeah, because I'm always helping her. Now my project is underdeveloped, undercooked, and everything. And so I think I learned that during my third year. And that's also part where I think I asked Tom about like, Tom, how do you do it? It's like,
Yeah.
and then we had to talk about like boundaries or something that you and Mali had set up, and maybe it could help me too. But yeah.
Yeah, I remember that, and I definitely think that that is super important because I understand that desire to be like, oh, I want to help as much as I can, but I feel like it's an important distinction where you don't want to interfere with their own learning and their own
Hmm.
growth design. So right, like making sure that you are able to like stop only providing feedback or critiques. Yeah, we do this. Her and I do this where it will often ask each other what we think, but it shouldn't ever be like unsolicited, I guess would be a good way to say it.
Mm,
Like
That's a good way to think
it would
about
be
it.
like, yeah, we'll often send each other stuff and be like, hey, what do you think of this? Or like, look what I did. Um, and I feel like we just don't like. I wouldn't like walk up to her desk and look over her shoulder and be like, so you're doing that wrong.
Why is that tree over there?
Yeah.
Shouldn't that be
Uh,
over?
so I think that's obviously an extreme example, but being able to, separate that, right?
yeah.
And I think honestly, that's an important lesson in design as well, right? I feel like you're forced to learn first year, or else you're not going to make it. That right, separate yourself from the design, right? I know
Hmm.
it's easy to tie a lot of your worth and value into a project that you're working on, but it shouldn't. Right, like it's just drawings. And I mean it's obviously important to care about it, but right,
Hmm.
if you just have a really off week and you send
Hmm.
out a whole bunch of bad schemes or sketches or plans or whatever, that doesn't make you a bad person.
Hmm.
It's just the kind of profession that we're in.
Right. So knowing that you've already graduated and working somewhere else while they're still in school, how did the long distance thing affect your relationship?
Mm.
Mm.
We've had to do long distance quite a few times. It first started, over the summers after like first year, after second year, and then our first real kind of challenge with long distance was when I was studying abroad because that's just a whole different animal. Because
Right.
Yeah.
Ryan was talking about time zones, having to manage that, and you can't it's hard to send things, physical
Hmm.
things back and forth, expensive. So we've had to, and then yeah, of course, between internships, my internship, her study abroad, my
Hmm.
study abroad, and then now this past year, like it's we've definitely had a fair amount of time being apart and having a long distance relationship, which is difficult. Yeah, but I feel like it we have a very rigorous like FaceTiming schedule, which is a lot better now. I feel like when we were during study abroad, it was a lot harder, and it was like maybe once a week our schedules would line up and we could FaceTime.
Hmm.
Now we are fortunately in the same time zone, so every night, around at like after dinner or before she goes back to studio, or sometimes even later, we
Hmm.
will at least call or FaceTime for a little bit, just to keep in touch. And we've done other things, like we've played like games online together, and we watched movies online.
Valorant.
No, like this is like a board game thing. Yeah, I'm not good at
Albert's obsessed with his Valorant, man.
yeah, I'm aware. Uh, so yeah, finding time to make those trips, and I feel like getting the most out of any time you actually have together. I feel like it makes that time much more special and more important. I feel like any time we get to see each other, it feels like a celebration now, which is exciting, and we
Dude,
want
that's beautiful.
to. Sometimes, Albert. Sometimes
I relate to that quite a bit,
I want
especially with the
something good.
person I was talking with back in well, our 5th year, and doing all those things too. Just going a few months apart from seeing each other, and then when you finally get to meet, it feels a lot better because, distance makes the heart grow fonder or whatever the cheesy sort of saying is. But it has some merit. It definitely makes it worth it too when you get to almost make it a point of a trip, not even just oh, let's see each other and just chat about things. It's more of a, oh, this is almost like a vacation, if you will, and
Mm,
try to make an actual event out of things. Like we went
mhm,
to go see concerts together a couple times, or once in Vegas, and that was a lot of fun. You get to explore that place for the first time, and just making active memories while getting to see each other again, I think was one of the better parts of my experience, at least with having that long distance. So there was a bit of some pros of that too. I mean, not that you
mhm.
couldn't do that with someone that was in your studio either. I mean, you could easily just pick a flight and go on the same one together out and come back. But I don't know. It had more of a romantic flair, if you will.
Mhm.
Getting to travel to meet somebody and spend the time with them and then have those memories with you on your way back to studio.
Right. Well, I guess to segue to the point, do you think that it's more beneficial to your relationship if you dated someone within your own discipline or outside your own discipline?
Or even within the industry or outside the industry.
Yeah, exactly.
Formula aside from Albert earlier. Yeah.
I like dating someone in the industry. I think it's gone pretty well. I think but again, I understand how other people would perceive it as too much, and we even recognize this sometimes. Like when we're calling, when we're FaceTiming, um, we have to be like, okay, we need to not talk about design or architecture tonight. We
Yeah.
chose a different topic, um, because yeah, I mean we're both already so invested in it. When we just talk, it often comes up.
Mhm.
But I think that is potentially, that can go both ways, right? Like I feel like I learn more about design and her area of design with landscape architecture talking to her than if
Mhm.
I was dating someone who was not in the profession. So I think I feel like there isn't a right answer. I think it's a case by case
Right.
basis based on who you are and your personality and who they are and their person.
I guess I think what I would say is it depends if you're in school versus you're in like in the workforce. When you're out there working, it feels like you have more time to spend with the people you love versus when you're in studio where you're always spending all of your time doing the projects, do the schools, like the classes and all those stuff. I would say date someone who's just as busy as you. So whether it be like med school people or whatever, Both of you guys will probably be spending more time with your own education, but within the workforce, I believe that it doesn't really matter because now you have your weekend free off for most part.
I was thinking about Tom's answer for a bit, and I think I resonate with that quite a lot. The idea that you get to learn so much from other people. Part of my favorite thing about relationships is just being able to learn other people or learn the person that you're talking to. So then for me, I really don't think it's a big deal because I think it can find interesting aspects in a person regardless of what they do. However, from a very like basic fundamental side, I can see a pro of dating somebody that's within your industry or whatever
Mhm.
is you have a lot more to relate on immediately because you pretty much have the same exact dialogue or whatever going on inside your brain. Like you all know who Mies van der Rohe is, and you're
Yo,
talking about these random
l-
things when you're on vacation, pointing to
look at
cool
the brick.
architecture.
It has to be an
You
art.
don't have to explain to them why are we staring at this brick facade for so long. It's like you don't get it. This is the Monadnock building. And telling that to someone who's not in the industry might be a bit more difficult. But I also think on the other side too, there could be some more interesting things to learn about a person, including what their work is if they're in a completely different industry. It's just like a whole different can of worms that you could open up and explore. But again,
Mhm.
like put it very simply, I don't think it really matters too much. It's just what interests you, maybe, or I don't know.
Mhm.
I even find now, um, talking to other people, not not romantically, just other people in the world.
Ah,
Like,
really?
Clip it,
I have
clip
no
it.
idea what other jobs do.
Oh.
Right? I've spent so much time studying and learning about architecture, and Malise also in landscape architecture. So, uh, like hearing about other careers and other professions, I'm like, oh, that's actually really interesting, and I had no idea what you actually did. My head is just filled with
Mhm.
blank stereotypes about doctors and engineers. So,
Okay, let's segue to another phase into like the relationships. This one is more focused on the breakup. So for the people looking for breakup stories, stop what you're doing now. This could actually help you because we've experienced it and we've learned something because of it. With your previous partners for Ryan and Tom, how did you know that the relationship was heading into the wrong direction? Were there signs that the
Mm.
relationship was going in the downhill or
I could start. I have one on top of my head. Reason why is because I had talked to some friends about this recently. This wasn't in college or anything related to recent partners. This was something I learned back in high school, but I think is applicable for anyone. I'm trying to remember where I learned this from first. It had to be some type of podcast or whatever, but they were making a really, really good point about how it's a balance of energy and commitment to people and just willingness to give versus receive. The quote was basically if you're putting more energy and effort into something, being the equivalent of if you're putting more into something than you're getting out of this relationship, I think that's a pretty indicative sign that things are starting to go downhill, or it's
Mm,
just something has to change, or some
mhm,
conversation has to happen. I'll keep the situation pretty brief, but there was a moment where I could definitely tell that like the relationship started out pretty strong, but then as time progressed, you could see that efforts and energy levels started to not match up quite so much anymore.
mhm,
And then there became a certain point where I realized, like, if both of us are just not at the same point anymore, it's, it
mhm.
is what it is. And
Yeah.
it's kind of pointless to keep something going if the fire is starting to die out. You can chuck as
Mhm,
much wood onto it, but you're putting extra energy into keeping something that should just fizzle out and put your efforts into something different. Yeah, I think it's just matching the energy and just the amount of effort both people are putting up. There's another one that I'll put real quickly too about people say that relationships are 50-50, but one that spoke to me pretty good was the idea that relationships are actually 110 and 100, or 110 and 110. The idea
mm,
being everyone should be putting their utmost into somebody, but during the days where one partner is falling short, the other person fills that gap. And vice versa, when you're feeling short on putting energy into things, whether you're stressed out or you're putting too much or you're stuck at work for so long or whatever, then the other person starts to fill that cup a little bit more for you.
mhm.
So that part I also think is a pretty good tip that I've heard from other places.
Yeah, I haven't had a breakup in quite some time, fortunately. Uh, I definitely,
That's a good thing.
I yeah, I definitely agree with what Ryan was saying about being there for the other person if they need support, providing it if you need support. That is an important balance. I mean, my breakups were in high school, and that's a very different situation than where I am now. There's just so many other external factors. Going to college, where is your
Hmm.
college? Time commitments. Can you even drive a car yet? All kinds of things that then are very big and important. But as you get older, I find are not as relevant. They're still important, but they don't seem as dire as
Hmm.
when you're in high school.
Yeah, did you have anything else to add, Albert?
Well, I agree with a lot of what you guys said. I think for me, it was just with me. I knew that the relationship started going downhill when you know that feeling when you're starting to lose who you are. It starts to
Mm,
become like you are becoming the relationship rather than you are you. I guess in color theory, it'd be like me being blue, her would be yellow, but then when we're together, it's green. But what ended up happening in my own relationship was me being blue was no longer me blue. I was straight up just green.
yeah.
But that's how I knew. And so I was like, oh, this is a bad idea. Get out.
It sounds like you need to clean your paintbrushes.
I was gonna say for some of our listeners listening, I'm thinking this would be a very important thing to think about as well. But on the topic of breakups, still, God forbid if that does happen in studio, like what happens? You know, we were talking before about does the dynamics change when people get into relationships?
Mm,
But again, none of us necessarily, well, I don't know. We can speak to it on personal experiences, but I would say from a third point perspective, did we ever realize that dynamics definitely changed with people once you figured out that they're no longer walking in the studio anymore together or
yeah.
I think that it is much more obvious and a quicker dynamic change when a couple breaks up than when they get together in studio.
hmm
Um,
Mm,
because I feel like often like a relationship can take some time to get going, but ending it's over. It's kind of a one action item right there.
yeah.
yeah.
And then then it I feel like within a studio setting, right, like who I hate this, but like do people pick sides? Was someone wrong? Was
Mm.
someone right?
Yeah.
Does
The
this
Civil
ruin
War in
like
studio.
the group project dynamic if they can't
Mm,
be on the same team? Who else is I feel like I can see that causing more issues than the start of a relationship.
hmm.
So then to ask on that too, do you think the fear of that happening would overpower thought of maybe it's wrong, but what if we do it anyway? As Albert would say.
Ryan, that
If
is a
someone is trying really contemplating shooting their shot and they hear that horror story about, ooh, if it goes bad, I don't who knows.
Ryan, I think that the it's wrong, but maybe we should do it anyway. Kind of energy is pretty strong and hard to stop that no matter what.
Dude, Tom understands. There's just like
Oh,
the
that's awesome.
the devil's on your shoulder, and it sounds
Hmm.
so good right now.
Yeah, because what if it doesn't? You never know.
Right. It's a 50-50.
It should not be a 50-50. You should be certain.
Oh, that's funny. But I definitely can see that if someone's really like, oh man, it's a tale's old as time. Even in not studio, even college or high school classes, people will be like, oh, I had this crush on this person, but if I ask them, won't that make the friendship weird and blah 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 blah
Mhm.
blah. And I don't think that, like what Tom was saying, I don't think that's ever stopped anybody in the past. I think people just, you know what, shit hit the fan, and now we just got to clean it up.
But if it did go bad, really like really really bad, and then you guys did break up. Who did you look towards for support, right? How did you cope?
Yeah, I guess like I don't know. I never really had the experience of it in studio.
Right.
But I would imagine if your closest friends are still with you through that relationship too. Tom was pointing it out before too, the picking sides thing. Unfortunately, I think that's just a reality of human behavior. Everyone wants to sort of aid the person that they sympathize with the most and everything.
Right.
But again, hoping for the best of humanity too. I think most people are usually pretty mature and can put aside their differences and try to just be neutral parties at best
Hmm.
with those situations in studio.
Yeah, I mean, I definitely have not experienced this in a studio setting, but I don't know. I personally would probably have asked like my parents, you know, if you have family support, siblings, aunts, uncles, you know, because they will probably be on your side, and they will also kind of an outside opinion, kind of more removed from the
Mm.
actual situation.
I guess that's a good point too. Or friends that aren't even at the college. I've had a few that were like hometown friends, I guess you could say, that I would talk to for support all the time with my most recent situation or most recent relationship. Whenever there was some type of like sour moment or maybe a rough patch for a couple days or something. And again, not being face to face, it's really hard to hyper analyze everything when you're just one person looking at it. So asking from multiple points of perspective from even hometown friends versus studio friends to see what they might think for advice and everything. But to make one last pivot, I think to end this on more of a funny note, let's say, thinking back to again, you were mentioning that you and Millie being in the studio for the first year and everything together, and then being able to split off and everything. Did you ever notice that the professors were definitely nudging you two together, or were there any funny moments that you definitely realized, oh, these professors or my studio mates are definitely in on something and they're trying to, set us up?
Yes. Yeah, definitely starting to realize, after the fact. I mean, well, yeah, our meet cute was in the very first couple weeks of the semester. She stole my ruler because we sat right next to each
Classic
other,
move.
and so she did give it back eventually, but it did take a while for me to find it. And then yeah, I've kept in touch well throughout college with professor that's interesting. Um, and yeah, you know, she'd ask about Malie and ask about how we're doing, and she was unfortunately someone beat us to it and told her about our engagement before we could do it. Um, but we were very excited
Oh.
to let her know because it is a little bit her fault.
I guess, Albert, did you have something from your perspective?
We did try to do competition at some point, but then I don't know, because it was so hard. We went to a professor and was like, "Hey, we're gonna try to do this competition," and then the professor just gave us like this a lot of information. We both just like we just looked at each other, was like, "Yeah, this isn't happening." But this was like outside of studio, like outside of, and after talking to that professor, it was just like we we looked at each other, we just decided, yeah, it's not happening.
Yeah, I'm trying to think of any of my moments. I think in general, I try to keep my relationships as private as possible. I don't hide it per se, but I try to, some things I think can just stay between you and another person.
Hmm.
But obviously, as Tom was saying earlier, studio or secrets get around pretty quickly in studio. So
Hmm.
if there's ever like protect yourself if you're whispering to your neighbor about, ooh, this person in studio, they're kind of they're kind of nice. And then that secret definitely won't stay secret for very long. But I remember for my specific experience, once I started to tell people that I was talking to the person that I was talking to, there were definitely a few more teases and prods at things, or different moments like, "Oh, where are you flying to this time?" or different moments like that are kind of fun. But like, I don't know, I like those kind of relationships where you get to be a bit more jokey and playful with people about things. I think
Hmm.
it makes life a little more fun.
Yeah.
So I think embrace it if it ever happens to you guys in studio. I think it's fun to just roll with the punches. But otherwise, I guess at this point too, we can transition into a thing we do at the end of our episodes called takeaways, where it's just if you have found anything new that you've or a new perspective about things, or you just have some final message that you think would be really important to add to things, that's where we try to do it in this segment. So, as guest honor, if you would like to go first,
All
you
right.
definitely may.
Sure. Takeaways. I think, I mean, probably biggest takeaways for, I would say, any relationship, whether it's studio based or otherwise, would be communication and boundaries, right? Definitely in a studio setting, and what we were talking about with long distance, just always under knowing what the other person is thinking and being honest about how everyone's feeling is very important. And then that knowing when you can tell them that your actual opinion about their portfolio, and when they want to hear, oh, that's great, right? And
Mm,
being able to separate your professional and romantic life is, I think, a very important uh, takeaway.
yeah. I think for my takeaway, trying to keep it mostly tied to our original question of like, should you or should you not ask that person in your studio? I think what I've learned from this is ultimately, you know, if you're thinking about it, you're more than likely gonna do it anyways. And I think we've from the conversations we had in this podcast episode, I think there are many opportunities where if you imagine the worst case scenario, it's really not that bad. And if you imagine the best case scenario, it can be really good and you could possibly marry that person, as we've seen from Tom's experience. So I honestly, it's a kind of a cop out answer, maybe, but I think it's, whatever feels right. Talk to a couple of friends that you can trust for sure. If just to get another point of
Mhm.
perspective before you go out and pull the trigger. But you know what? Yeah, live your best life. Do it for the Lord.
Yeah, dude, I'm on the same boat as Ryan. I think my takeaway is, do it for the plot, do it for the character development. It's like, okay, if it does go bad, here's another takeaway. If it does go bad, you got friends. They'll help you out. They'll support you. You have your family. You have everything. But yeah, do it for the plot.
Well, anyways, I think that wraps up today's episode. We want to thank you guys very much for checking out this episode. Hopefully, it was a pretty fun one. We try to change it up a little bit, especially for a Valentine's theme. Try out some other ones, maybe later on some other episodes down the road. But also, we want to thank Tom, amazing guest. Thank you for being with us.
Thank you so much for having me.
Oh, we're curious. Do you have anything that you want to plug? If you want to shout out your design page on Instagram, or if you have a website or anything that people could check out?
I do have a design Instagram, Thomas Putnam Designs, and now I'm gonna have to post on it more because it's gonna be on the internet.
All right, accountability. No, just yeah.
Hopefully, you guys, after listening to this episode, you got all the information you needed before you actually shoot your shot. But anyway, before you leave, if you like this episode and want to check out some of our other episodes, like our mental health episode and our new episode that came out last week, which is self-teaching skills, you should check it out. Also, if you have anything you want us to talk about in our podcast, DM us your questions and topics on Instagram.
At Crit Room Podcast. But yeah, anyways, see you guys in the next episode, and don't forget to save.